There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we'll be learning more about how to become a certified archivist with Academy of Certified Archivists Regent for Outreach, Josh Kitchens. Josh is also the director of the Clayton State Archival Studies program. He teaches a variety of courses at Clayton State that cover archival topics, including digital preservation, law and ethics, appraisal, and various special topic courses. Josh is currently researching appraisal practices and representation/access of archival collections and public records. He previously served as an archivist for special collections at the Georgia College Ina Dillard Russell Library. There he was responsible for digital collections, the library's institutional repository known as the Knowledge Box, which I really enjoy as a name, and university archives. For everyone's reference, I've posted a link to the handbook for certified archivists in the chat, and this is being recorded and will be posted to our website in the coming days. And so without further ado, I'll hand the virtual mic over to Josh. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. And if we have a little extra time, I can talk about that process. I'm still surprised to this day that I got that name for the Institutional Repository push through, but I did, I did what I could. So you should be seeing my screen. I did turn on captions in PowerPoint, and hopefully this is helpful and useful. It's something I try to do, is make sure everything I do is captioned. And my kind of goal for today is to just walk you through what ACA is, or the Academy of Certified Archivists is, what we do, and kind of its value in terms of to the profession, to you as an archivist as well. We'll talk about sort of the process for certification. I'll talk about our current, what we call our domains. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. And questions can be about the Academy. If you've got other kinds of questions, I'm always an open book to answer anything related to archives, records, etc. So to start off with, the Academy has a mission. And one of the big things about our mission is that we really want to kind of push the archival profession to its kind of highest possible limits that we can. Really, what the Academy is all about is making the profession as the best possible profession that we can be. And one of the ways we do this is we think about what it means to be an archivist. And mostly we think about what it is we need to know while working in archives, and also what we do being archivists. And the way we approach dealing with these sort of what we think of as knowledge and task is to do an examination process for the initial part of becoming certified. So you've probably all heard about the ACA exam. That's how we kind of test people on these knowledge kind of concepts and tasks of things that we do as archivists. We also, of course, are involved with many of the same things that SAA does. We've directly connected to SAA and discuss standards, as well as the value of CA for organizations that are doing hiring of archivists. There's also another process that I want to save for a little later that we do as part of this to kind of promote and make the best possible profession that we can. So, quick little history of the Academy. We were founded in 1987. This was actually something that came out of SAA Council, and they sort of formed off this secondary group from SAA. We get started in 1989. I still talk to a couple of people I know who were what they called sort of grandfathered in, originally certifying archivists, and they kind of talk longingly of those days. We finally reached around 1,000 members, and we have just over 1,000 members right now, as of probably a couple of days ago, if I know what my meeting numbers were. The way the Academy works is we've got what we call our regents, and our regents sort of do different things for the organization. We have a president, vice president, the usual sort of organizational leadership. But because we are so focused on doing the certification process, some of our other core board members are working on that actual certification process. So we have our exam development committee. This is the group of people who come up with the questions, who think about the field, think about the literature that's in the field, and develop the exam, develop the reading list. I was on the EDC for 3 years. That was a lot of fun, but I'm kind of a weirdo, which you may learn talking to me a little bit. But I really enjoyed dealing with some of these issues and thinking about, okay, what's this for and that for, etc. Then we also have a Regent for certification management. I mentioned earlier that the Academy does something else to promote the field. Well, certification isn't just about taking the test. It's actually about maintaining certification. And the way an individual does that is both, yeah, you could take the test again, but really the cool thing is, and I've been recertified once, um, it's another couple of years before I'm up again, but is actually being active in the field, attending workshops, taking classes, working with the Academy as a volunteer, and working with SAA as a volunteer, working with one of our many wonderful regional Archival organizations as a volunteer. And this is where, and I'll kind of draw on this a little bit, I think the Academy does some of its best work is we help the archival field be its best as it possibly can. Yes, through examination, but also by encouraging our members to maintain their certification by being active archivists, both active learners and also active promoting our field, working with our field and our various organizations that we utilize to promote our field and to increase our kind of education about our field. Then we have the Regent for Outreach, that's me. I talk a lot to people who are thinking about taking the exam, do all that sort of fun social media stuff, marketing, and so forth. We have a new Regent for Member Services that just came on board this year. That position is all about working with the members to kind of show the value of the Academy. We've got some exciting things that'll be coming out in the near future. We're going to start doing some workshops, a lot of mixers for our members, Zoom mixers for the time being, as well as some other things to kind of help them get through their certification process and learn more about their career as an archivist. We have a Regent for Nominations. This is usually one of our past presidents, and they sort of help us decide who will run for key positions, who might be on some of our committees that we have that require appointments. And then last but certainly not least, we have the person who sort of manages the exam. And so we have an exam administrator. Furthering on, we do work with a management company, and we have several key volunteers as well. So we have a secretariat. This is the person with our management company. And we work with people who do digital communications for us, as well as write the newsletter. We do currently work with a psychometrician, as well as a kind of say / online testing company right now. This is kind of changing a little bit. And we have a lot of various task force that help us think through some of these issues. Like an example of a task force that recently concluded is we are going to be adding another domain at some point in the next year or so to the domains we have, and this is going to include diversity and inclusion. And I do ask for forgiveness. My cat found a way to open the door, so you're going to have a guest in just a moment. We also have various committees that help us do things such as our member services committee. So I wanted to pause for a moment and sort of say, well, why do we certify? And I think the best way to do that is kind of tell you why I became a certified archivist. Back, you know, let's zoom backwards. As 2011, I've been in my position as an archivist for not quite 3 years yet, because you apply to take the exam a couple of years or a few months before you hit like your mark. And I think, okay, this would be great. I've got to go up for pre-tenure. I'll get a certification. This will help me with my pre-tenure. And I went in, I did my certification exam. I passed it. It was a challenge. I'm not going to say the test is easy, but it is a challenging thing, something you need to prepare for. And I became a certified archivist. Well, when I really learned what it meant to be a certified archivist is actually I went to one of the item writing workshops that the Academy does every year. And this is where we get members of the Academy to write questions that will end up in the exam bank. So I went to one of these sessions. I got to meet a lot of really fantastic people. And I got to meet Rebecca Hernandez. I don't know if you've met her before, but she was one of our former regents for exam development. I got to meet Michelle Gentz, who did a presentation on accessibility in archives this summer at SAA. And I kind of got hooked. And that was when I realized what the Academy really does. And I ended up getting on the EDC that year, as well as a couple of other smaller committees sort of related to the certification process. With that was a great experience, but then I really saw the value when I went through my recertification process. Sitting down and, I know we don't always like to think about all the stuff we do as professionals or that we do as students, but sitting down and thinking about all the different things I worked on to either work with organizations in the field, educate myself about different topics in archives, made me really realize that, hey, the Academy is doing some really important work here. We're helping the field through our certification process um, become better, to sort of reach whatever high point we kind of wanted, or just encourage, I think encourage might be the better phrasing here, encourage the field and our fellow archivists to do really great work, to work together, to educate themselves, and to generally make our archival work, both for us and our users and all the communities we represent, the best it possibly can be. We generally say the benefits are, yes, it does give you a bit of a competitive advantage when you're going out for job applications. This is an important thing, of course. That CA, I love signing my emails off with my CA at the end. It's one of my favorite little things to do. It's, it's not like a brag thing, but it's a thing that means something to me. It's a very understandable credential. In my teaching, I've been really fortunate to have a lot of students go into corporate archives, and I've had a few students go into records management. And in particularly in the corporate world, the CA is really well understood. Corporate HR managers and hiring people understand certifications. They understand those. That's something they get. I also say, and I think it's important for any kind of archive, whether it be governmental, community, or even traditional ones that we see in institutions of higher education. It gives you a tool to evaluate, especially if you're trying to apply for jobs. But I think these are also two other ones, and I've already emphasized heavily about strengthening the profession. But I also think it builds confidence. And that means, like, you get your test results back from your certification exam, and you're like, I know what I'm talking about. There is not an archivist out there, I think, that at some point in time has not felt some level of imposter syndrome. I know I feel it both as an academic and I have felt it as an archivist, but having my certification really helped me kind of get over that a little bit, or it helped me think about, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing here, at least a little bit. I mean, there's always days that I prove that I don't know what I'm doing, but that's another story. In terms of kind of various industries that we have members in, we have, of course, a lot of members in governmental and institutional archives. We have them in academics, corporate, religious institutions, museums, and then, of course, we have some retired archivists as well as unaffiliated members. These numbers are a little bit old, because I would actually like to say our international membership is starting to grow a little bit. This past summer we had, I think the furthest away we had test takers was from Japan, and I think we had 3 or 4 people from Japan taking the certification exam, which I think is like the coolest thing ever. But I really love talking about archives from an international standpoint as well. When we talk about the application process, we do have an online form currently. This is probably going to change a little bit in the very, very near future. But it will still be an online process. It's just going to be more of a online form process. There are some things you need to gather, such as transcripts, especially if you will be graduating in the near future, as well as other supporting document if you've had work experience and so forth. But you can see the data there that you'll need now if you want to start planning for that. There is usually a little bit of funding floating around for the exam. We've previously had travel funding. We won't necessarily have travel funding next year, so we may have more funding for some of the exam fees, because the exam is definitely going to be online next year. That's already been decided. So types of information you want to think about. You will need the full application, which has sort of information about your persona. You will need some descriptions if you're talking about whatever archival program you've been in. If you have a job description, you may need that as well. And maybe some documentation of work done, because one of the things we talk about is certifying people who've been in the field for 2 years. There is an application fee, and $50, it's non-refundable. One of the sort of caveats we have is we really want the people who sit for the exam to have a master's degree with 9 semesters or 12 quarter hours of instruction in archives of some kind. We also would possibly ask for 1 year of qualifying experience. This would allow you to come in as a full member of the academy. We also have a provisional status. You could come in without that concentration if you have 2 years of experience without being a provisional status. And so this is, of course, whatever is equivalent in the US or a foreign equivalent of the same type of master's degree. For provisional certification, this is what we have for fresh out of grad school students. If you've got an archival concentration, you do not need the work experience, but what you will have to do in the near future once you pass the exam is within 3 years or so, which should be hopefully very easy to do, earn that sort of 1 year of professional experience. And the big thing about this is you will not have to pay dues until you are fully certified. So you're off the hook until you get your full 1 year's experience. I was fortunate when I came in, I had 2 full working years of experience, so I didn't need that kind of provisional mention, but it is something we do for those. So when we talk about qualifying experience, and we have sort of debated this, so I'm not going to tell you this is going to be exactly the way it will be in even the next couple of months, but we do want people to have the title of archivist. There is some debate about whether or not what is paraprofessional work, so I won't go into that right now, but what we're really trying to say is you have a demonstration of the field, you've understood it from a working standpoint, whether it be ethical obligations, the various duties that archivists perform, and kind of understand how to work as an archivist. Let's talk a little bit about the domains. Now, I did mention there is the possibility of a new 8th domain coming out. Currently, we have 7 with what we call our general domain. The general domain just sort of covers sort of basic concepts of archives. And so if you look at the handbook, you'll see the general domain kind of gives you some readings about the basics. The other ones are selection, appraisal, acquisition. So covers these sort of conversations you have about how do we make determinations of what we want to collect in an archives, and how does that process play out in terms of legal, ethical obligations. And then we have, of course, arrangement description. So the discussion of what do we do when we are arranging and describing materials. Think metadata, think standards, think various descriptive practices as well. Then we have reference in access. This was my EDC domain, so this is all about reference and access. How do we go about doing reference? What are the things we need to know about accessing materials? How do we work with users, reference interview, etc. We also have the next domain, which is preservation and protection. So basics of preservation, basics of security. Remember, preservation isn't just, we need to maintain 50% humidity, 60 degrees plus or minus, whatever. It's also what kind of security do you need to have? What might be the arrangement of a reference desk, and so forth. And of course, outreach, advocacy, and promotion. So things about, this is sort of the one that connects things like exhibits and online forums of information, as well as how do you advocate for being an archives, for funding, and little things like that. A section on management as well. So this is more concerned with things like mission statements, those kind of core concepts of archives. And then last, but certainly not least, professional, ethical, and legal responsibility. So this is minimal kind of understanding of things like copyright law and what being an ethical archivist means, and what should the working relationship be among archivists, both in the same institution as well as among outside institutions. With each of these domains, we have, like I said earlier, knowledge statements. So these are what we think of is an archivist should know certain things. They should know how to complete an acquisition. They should understand the basic standards of arrangement and description. They should, understand DAX to some extent, or understand what DAX is, and have a knowledge of that. After these sort of knowledge statements, we have general tasks. So an archivist should be able to do certain things as well. And we consider these generally sort of to understand kind of what an archivist does throughout their work experience. We regularly revive the RDS, which we call the role delineation statements. I actually worked on that process this past year, and so the new version of that will be rolling out for examining next year. So when I say next year, they'll start developing questions for the 2022 exam. The next year's exam won't be based off of the revised statements yet. So big news just got today. I know when the exam is going to be next year. We will be having the exam, and it will be online, and it's going to run from June 24th to 26th. And since we're online, we will have different time slots for potential applicants to take the exam. I don't know exactly what those are going to work out. That's up for the Regent for exam administration to come up with, but essentially we will have I think 90-minute blocks to take the exam. It will probably be it will be proctored in some form or fashion. I can't say if that's going to be proctored live by a person over something like Zoom, or if it'll be use one of the live proctoring services, but I do want to let you know it will be proctored. To apply for the exam, we're going to open the application process up March 1st, and it will run for 2 months. And so you have that 60-day window to apply for the exam and complete it there. Now, in terms of initial fees, I should have taken out the early bird. I don't believe we will be doing an early bird thing. I thought I caught that one, but we do have an application fee of $50. There is a certification fee, and I know it's a lot, but this kind of satisfies your certification requirement that happens 30 days after you're past the exam. And then we have an annual dues of $50, which in many respects is a lot more affordable than some of the other organizations out there. Especially with a lot of the workshops and other things we're going to be doing in the very, very near future. Michelle is a powerhouse of ideas and getting things done. So I know we'll have some really exciting things in the next year or two for our members to participate in. But those are our annual dues. When we talk about the recertification process, it happens every 5 years. You don't pay extra to recertify. You can take the exam again. Personally, I would actually recertify by petition. And the reason I recommend that is because it actually makes you think about what you're doing as an archivist. Are you staying up to date? Are you publishing things? Not necessarily everybody's going to publish. Publishing's hard, or has a mental barrier that you may get into with that. But are you attending workshops? Are you working in the field to promote the field through our various regional or national level organizations? There's plenty of opportunities out there, I think, to volunteer, both with the Academy, but with many of our other organizations. Are you doing other things, teaching, running workshops, those kinds of things? We give you credit for all of the work we do as archivists, including our professional work. You get credit for doing that as well. So there's many opportunities for you to make up and certify by petition, I think, relatively easily. All of the information about the certification process is in our handbook, which we have a link that we share here, the application form. We will have sort of a different looking online form in the very, very near future. So it's going to look a little differently. We're in one of those sort of changing points in time, especially considering we've gone to an online exam. So some of these things aren't quite done yet, but they will hopefully be done in the very, very near future. But you can see what they look like online right now, at least the older versions. We do have some social media and some, of course, places where you can follow us. We seem to have a pretty active following, mostly on Facebook, surprisingly. Twitter, we're trying to do a little bit better job of, and then we have a LinkedIn group once you become that you can follow for updated information. On the website, of course, you can find a lot of really great information about us. The exam application, the handbook, locations. This is all going to be online next year. Our member directory, so that you can, if you're interested in reaching out to some of our members, you can reach out to them. News, history, and of course, different ways to get involved. And so with that, I've hit about 30 minutes, which is what I thought I would hit. Do you have any questions for me? If you have questions outside of our talk tonight, you can actually email them directly to ACA@Caphill. This is Mike, he's our secretariat. You can also call if you need to call. And if he doesn't know the answer to it, he can send it to one of the regents who can answer it better for you, whether it be the regent for exam administration, exam development, or myself, or Michelle, or any of us who do outreach and working with our members. But with that, I'm going to stop talking for a second. Actually, I think I'll stop sharing my screen. And if you've got any questions, we can talk about those.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was so informative. I just have a quick, what is a psychometrician?
Okay, so that's a fun term. So they are the people that look at tests and figure out how to construct a test appropriately and effectively. And so that's, we've worked with, we have an individual we worked with. We're also working with a vendor called Perlidian, who's going to be doing some of that work for us as well as our current psychometrician. But really, it's sort of like, there is a whole science of test making and test administration and test taking that is quite fascinating, in trying to make sure that not only is the test that we're creating or the exam that we're creating fair, but also is it actually doing what we want it to do? Is it actually asking the types of questions we need to ask, as well as determining whether or not a question is good, or if it's a bad question, or if you know, because that was one of the really great things about being on the exam development committee, was I have learned a lot about writing questions.
Sure.
A skill set I never intended to have in my life, but it is one I have now.
Wow. Oh, that sounds really interesting. I think this was incredibly thorough. I'm not sure that I have that many questions personally. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to put it in the chat box, unmute, whatever you prefer.
Hey, can you hear me, Marley?
Yes.
Hi, Josh. My name's Kyle. I just had a question about, in general, is there any kind of like a study guide or maybe practice questions for the tests anywhere, or?
Yeah, there is practice questions in the handbook. One of the things I think we're going to have out at the first of the year is a little bit of a study guide. And I say this, I know we're being recorded. So I encourage my students to always take the ACA exam, partly because I have created my curriculum like very strategically tied to the domains. Mm-hmm. But I actually have them run through sort of a thought exercise right before they graduate about concepts that I think are important to understand, but also that I think might help them with the exam. So one thing I always advocate to anybody is think about key terms, and maybe even write down key terms in terms of what archivists do. So appraisal, selection, arrangement, description, things like that, and try to define them on your own without looking anywhere, and then go out and look at things like the SAA dictionary as well. Look at maybe some other readings that are out there that kind of do some definitions of those kind of things. And then also think about sort of big core concepts in archive. So appraisal, selection, you know, acquisition process, those kind of things, and start thinking about maybe some key concepts that you know just from your own personal knowledge, and then start investigating different readings, especially ones that are recommended in the certification handbook, because we give you a whole kind of bibliography of material to go to and sort of start doing kind of definition things. Now that works for me. That's something I do with my students, so it might not be the best thing to do, but it is it helps you think about what do you know and what do you need to try to figure out and get a better understanding of. I mean, the exam is really created from the literature that exists out there about archives, but also sort of the EDC's understanding of the field, as well as our members' understanding of the field, where they write questions for our question sessions that we have. And so the key thing is like, think about these big concepts and kind of define them for yourself, and find places where they're cited in different readings, writings that have been out and kind of gained a lot of traction. Probably not going to see stuff from the last like 2 years on the exam, but like 3 or 4 years ago as well. Also, try to remember what your metadata acronyms stand for.
Okay.
I know there's a ton of acronyms out there, but have a rough understanding of some of the biggies.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So it's more like well-established like ideas in the field.
I would say that, as well as like well-established, but also, as I said, we're talking about diversity and inclusion as one of our new domains. We think that is a very important aspect of the field that we want people to understand, as well as we want to promote and encourage. And so as things get established, and I mean, like the exam development committee is 7 people. Plus the Regent, and it is literally they get together and talk for a day and a half once a year and have these kind of, I won't call them arguments, but we have really animated discussions about what's important and whether or not something has reached the point where we have to start talking about it in examining. So, but it does develop and evolve, but it is, I like to think of it as pretty well established things. Even if it's a little newish, I mean, like MPLP, that's something that you'll want to know about. I mean, that's pretty well established, even if it is, 13 some odd years old, 14, 20. Is it 20 years old? Please don't tell me it's 20 years.
It's not 20 years yet, I don't think. Was it 2002 when that article came out?
I don't know why I think it's 7, but that's just.
Yeah. Building on Kyle's excellent question, the exam is still multiple choice, right?
Still multiple choice.
Okay.
100 questions broken down there. And there wasn't a slide about this, but we should mention this. You aren't scored on your full score. You're scored based off each domain and how many questions you get right within that domain. Now there is, I don't want to call it grading on a curve, but it's essentially what you would think of grading on a curve. We call it a cut score. And so everybody will take the test. We'll determine how hard it was. This is where the psychometrician comes in. Mm-hmm. And we create a score that we think is a passing score from that. So that's the big job of the psychometrician is they do that. And so you get basically breakdowns, and you have to pass certain amounts within each of the domains to pass. So you're really being tested on every single domain, not just a whole grab bag of questions that reflect those domains.
So it's like the driving test.
Yes, it's like a driving test.
Okay, cool. But then also, presumably this is something that people debate vigorously about and decide how it gets on. But what about things that are kind of, this I hope isn't an incredibly thorny issue anymore from my perspective, but like something like archival neutrality, is that something that you're gonna have to like?
That is definitely something I don't think you will see a question on.
Okay.
In a couple of years. Because I want to say that I remember reviewing a question about that, and it was like,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you'll see bigger, I think, concepts of, when, I mean, and I can't give you concrete examples.
Sure.
When something about copyright, like when you put something online and the concept you use to potentially put things online, that is fair use, something like that.
Sure.
I mean, and then some concepts like, what does advocacy do? And it could be multiple things like request for more funding, et cetera, that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. All right. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Monica. Can you hear?
Yes, Monica.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. I was wondering if you could just review briefly the slide about qualifications with the master's program. You had the concentration up and some of the semesters. If you could just briefly go over that again.
Yeah, so when it comes to coming into being certified, one of the things we look at is the experience. And that's sort of been one of the core features is wanting those who are certified to have some experience. So if you come in right out of school and you don't have any, what would be reviewed as work experience, and that would be up to the exam, the Regent for Exam Development to make that determination. You need 1 year if you've been in a program that has 9 semesters of course, or nine, that should be 9 hours. And what we mean by hours, so that's like 3 courses would be 9 semesters if you're on a semester system. I don't even know if anybody uses quarter. Do y'all use quarter systems before I say what I was about to say?
We use semesters, I think, but like 9 credit hours.
Yeah, like 9, so 3 classes.
Okay, cool.
Is what we're looking for. When we talk about provisional, this is for recent ones. We usually look for a concentration in archives. So just as long as you can prove your program has some kind of concentration. And concentrations can vary in size. I mean, I think typically they're around 3 classes minimum, probably a lot more than that.
Ours is much more extensive than that, yeah.
I'm about to say, like, I'm giving you the low ball figure here, but 3 is like the minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't hesitate to use the chat box if you don't want to talk personally.
Well, while we wait, I'll mention, I did say I'd talk about the knowledge box. Yes,
Yes, please.
That was, so I had been advocating for a institutional repository. It was going on like 4 years before I got the administrative, I say administrative, like above me administrative approval. And I pulled together a whole group of people. So it was sort of a mishmash of people in our library, from our user services to our reference department to myself, and then a couple of other people. And honestly, it came about, we were riffing one day. We were trying to come up with a name for it. We didn't want just some sort of like, this is the Georgia College Institutional Repository, because I think we were saying like that's GCIR or something like that. It didn't have a really good name to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if it was me or one of my colleagues. I feel like it might have been one of my colleagues said, well, we could call it the knowledge box. I think we actually started something about box and put it in the box, and I said knowledge box.
Mm-hmm.
And communications just went with it. They were okay with it. They created me a logo, or at least a simple little logo. I will admit, I know we're still being recorded, learn how to, if you ever do anything that's sort of a public facing thing, learn how to work with your public relations approver people.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Will admit that I may have waited till someone left the institution, and then I published the IR the day after they left, because it was easier to get approval at that point. But
sure, yeah, that
does happen. You can get into those kind of roadblocks when you're dealing with these kind of things. But I'm still like, the anniversary of it was about a month ago, and I saw it again. Like, I still can't believe I got this through, and they're still using the name. I'm like, okay, I'll just take that as my one fun little professional achievements.
Fantastic, yeah. Well, I mean, archivists have to know how to work with red tape, right?
Yeah.
Quite literally.
I oftentimes like to say it is like, our field is so much about understanding people and working with people more than you even realize it. I think, like, when we're processing documents, we're working with people. When we are working with users, we're working with people. There is so much. I mean, the best classes I ever took was psychology classes in undergrad, and I didn't know they were going to be useful until I got into archives. I'm like, oh,
mm-hmm.
Don't knock those psychology courses.
Well, if nobody has any questions, please don't hesitate to holler out. But if nobody has any questions, I'm going to say thank you very much. This was so helpful and so informative. And I'm really excited to take a closer look at the handbook and see what we're dealing with the exam. I'm really jazzed. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here. And feel free, if anybody wants to reach out with me with any kind of questions.
Absolutely. I will be sure to circulate your email to everyone if that's all right with you, so that if you have any questions, anything like that. All right. Well, have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great rest of your Tuesday and great rest of your week. Thanks again.
Thank y'all.
All right. See ya.